on Chaf Amid Beis, on the bottom by the two dots. So we had a machlekes before. We finished up a machlekes. Well, a continuous theme of an argument was what is the argument in the Mishnah between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? Is it that Beis Hillel went ahead and he totally allowed any carbon, any sacrifice to be brought on Yom Tov, regardless if it was an obligatory sacrifice for Yom Tov, or no, it was only the sacrifices that were required to be brought on Yom Tov, but just to fulfill your vows and to bring presents to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that would not be included in the permission to bring sacrifices on Yom Tov. For those, you can wait till after Yom Tov. So the Gemara asks, according to the one that holds that Beis Shammai is of the opinion that one cannot bring Nedarim and the Davais, one cannot fulfill your vows and bring presents as a carbon on Yom Tov. What's the halach if he goes ahead and they slaughter?
Does Beis Hillel agree to that also?
No, Beis Hillel. That's Beis Hillel. I said Beis Shammai. Okay, sorry. So according to Beis Hillel, who holds that the Nedarim and Davais is not they can't be brought on Yom Tov, what happens if one goes ahead and actually slaughters? So we have one answer. Rav Amar, Zarkas Adama Manas Lahater Basar Bachila. So we say you should go ahead and you should throw the blood on the mizbeach in order to permit you to go ahead and eat the meat, in order to eat the meat. Because until one goes, even though they slaughtered it and they weren't supposed to, once they slaughtered it, you could go ahead, and as long as you're going to be able to eat the meat, you could go ahead and continue with the sacrifice, because at the end of the day, is not like you didn't transgress a biblical commandment because you did end up eating it on Yom Tov. So it's not the end of the world. You shouldn't do it, but if you did it, you should continue with the sacrifice. But now, but Rabbi Baruch, I remember Rabbi Baruch is of the opinion that no, you don't even have to eat the meat. You even could throw the blood on the zbeach in order to complete the sacrifice, to bring the leftover, the fats and the innards onto the mizbeach in the evening. Now, my benayu, what's the difference between the two? What's the difference between throwing the blood in order to eat it and throwing the blood in order to bring the remnants and the innards and the fats onto the mizbeach in the evening? What's the practical difference? Nitma basar. Let's say the basar became impure. Now you're not allowed to eat it, or gets lost. So according to Rava, the only reason you're able to throw the blood and continue with the avodah, with the service, even though you weren't supposed to slaughter this animal, is only if you're going to actually eat the meat to fulfill that requirement on Yom Tov, that one is only allowed to shecht on Yom Tov or to eat on Yom Tov. But Rabbi Baruch Zarik. But let's say according to Rabbi Baruch, even though you lost the ability to eat the meat, now it's a bit of a problem because you slaughtered on Yom Tov for a non-Yom Tov reason. Still, it is enough of a reason to continue the sacrifice, to continue the avodah in order to place the innards onto the mizbeach. Now, Meisvei, we have a following question: That what happens if you have the sheep of Shavuos, which one went ahead and he slaughtered it for the wrong with the wrong intention, or you slaughtered it during the wrong time. So hadam mizrak v'habasar yachel. So halacha is, even though it was done in the wrong manner, still you could go ahead and you could throw the blood and you could eat the meat. V'mhaisa Shabbos, but if it's Shabbos, not Yom Tov, but if it's Shabbos, lo yizrak, you should not throw the blood. You should not continue. V'mzarak, but if you do throw it, now we go to the top of Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. It works, and it works as like a para. So we have the following statement. We said that if you're bringing a carbon which you're supposed to bring on Yom Tov, but you brought it at the wrong time, or you had the wrong intention, we say you shouldn't. You could continue throwing the blood on condition to eat the meat. Now, if you can't eat the meat, you shouldn't throw the blood. But if you do, you could continue and you could go ahead and you could bring you could bring it on condition to bring the innards and the fats in the evening. Now, on this we take one of the words imzarak, and when we lost the meat, if you happen to throw it, then you could bring the innards onto the mizbeach in the evening. So we see that if one cannot eat the meat, one should not really continue with the avodah. They should stop. It happens to be if by mistake they throw the blood onto the mizbeach, then you could continue on with the avodah and bring the fats in the evening. Now, Bishlei Milarava Nicha, according to Rava, that's fine, because according to Rava, he said that the only time if you slaughter an animal by mistake in the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Tov, the only time you continue with it is only in order to eat the meat. If you don't eat the meat, then you got to stop. That happens to be. If you threw the blood on it, then we let you continue and bring the innards into them in the evening. Rabbi Boruch, Kasha B'Kuntra, Rabbi Boruch, it's a question. Rabbi Boruch, that you are supposed to, if you slaughter an animal by mistake, you're supposed to go ahead and continue with the avoid, even though you can't eat it. So that's a question on Rabbi Boruch. So the Gemara answers, Kasha, yes, it's a difficulty. We don't have an answer. Yeah.
Page and line.
So we're on Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. We're on 21a, and we're beginning 4 lines from the bottom. Ibai Sema. 4 lines from the top. Sorry, 4 lines from the top.
We're on 21. Oh, we're on 21b.
21a, 4 lines from the top.
21a, 4 lines
from the top.
Beginning.
Ibai Sema. No, Ibai Sema. But one answer is that yes, it's a difficulty, and it's a great question. Rabbi Boruch, we don't have the answer. The other answer is no, there is an answer. That in the case of Shavuos, that was talking about Shabbos. Shabbos is a lot worse off than Yom Tov. Yom Tov, you're allowed to slaughter if you want to eat on Yom Tov. So when did we say you should only continue with Avodah if you could eat according to Rabbi Boruch? That's on Shabbos. But in Yom Tov, it's not such a big deal, and then you could continue on even if you can't eat the meat. Then you'll be permitted to go ahead and continue, and even though you can't eat the meat, continue with avodah in order to bring the fats and innards onto mizbeach on in the evening. We are on Chaf Aleph and Aleph. We're on 21a by the 2 dots, 4 lines from the top. Okay. Bo'mine Rav Avya Saba Rav Huna. So Rav Avya Saba had a question to Rav Huna. He had a question. If you have an animal which is half owned by a Jew and half owned by a non-Jew, are you allowed to go ahead and slaughter on Yom Tov? Because as we know, you're only allowed to slaughter in order for a yid to eat on Yom Tov, but for an adulterer to eat on Yom Tov, that we're not allowed to go ahead, and we don't allow you to cook for a non-Jew. Now, this animal is half owned by a non-Jew. So when you're slaughtering it, you are slaughtering it for a Jew, but at the same time you're slaughtering it for a non-Jew. So what's the halacha? So Amrlei mutter. So he said it's permitted. So the answer was it's permitted. So Amrlei, so he asked back, why is that? Why is this different than between the Nedarim and the Davis, between the presence and fulfilling the vows on Yom Tov? Now, as Rashi explains, is that when you're bringing an endava or bringing a present to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, like a peace offering, or you're fulfilling a vow, then it's half for yourself and half for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you're slaughtering, when you're doing even though it's true, you're allowed to slaughter in the Beis HaMikdash. And now, according to Beis Hillel, and we're going with the opinion, Beis Hillel holds you're not allowed to bring the Dam V'Davis in the Beis HaMikdash on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to fulfill non-Yom Tov sacrifices in the Beis HaMikdash on Yom Tov. Now, why is that different? That if we look at the sacrifices half for Hashem and half for us, and you're not allowed to go ahead and slaughter it. So then when you have an animal which is half owned by a Jew, half owned by a non-Jew, we can look at the slaughtering part is also doing on behalf of the non-Jew. Then if that's permitted, then when we come back to the presence and the Nedarim and the Beis HaMikdash, we could look at then also, even though it's true that half of it is not for yourself, half is for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but at least we could look at the half that you're doing for yourself, and we should matter it. So it's a question on the opinion of Beis Hillel, or at least he's bringing a proof on this halacha, which one is permitted to go ahead and slaughter half an animal, half owned by a non-Jew, half owned by a Jew. We have a question on that from Beis Hillel, who holds that one cannot go ahead and slaughter and bring a sacrifice from an animal which is not a Yom Tov obligation. So Amrlei, so he answered back, Arba Pareach. He said, he quickly said, oh look, a raven's flying. He shrugged it off and he changed the topic. Now, Kinafik, so when Rav Avya Saba left, Amrlei Rabba Brei, so the son of Rav Huna asked, Lav Hainu Rav Avya Saba de Mishtabeach Leimar Begave de Gavra. Why are you shrugging him off? Is this not the great sage which you each claim, you yourself claim that he's great? So why are you just shrugging him off and not answering his question? So the Gavra Abu Amrlei, so he said back, what am I supposed to do? Ani Hayoim. So today, Samchuni Bashishos, so I was leaning, he quotes a pasuk, and he says, I'm leaning on a thick tree, or Funi Betapuchim, and I want to sit among apple trees. Meaning, what as Rashi explains that, he was extremely tired. He just came back from the Beis Medrash on Yom Tov. He was giving a lecture all morning on a Torah lecture, and he was just too tired to answer the question. So he just ignored it, and he wanted to go home and actually eat something. I need to eat, and he brought me a question. He asked me a question which required a lot of reasoning and a lot of logic, and therefore I can't answer it right now. I'm too tired. Now, at the end of the time, so Gemara asks, what's the reason? At the end of the day, he has a very good question. This is a great question because if we have a animal which is half owned by a Jew, half owned by a non-Jew, and we say it's permitted, so obviously we ignore the fact that you're slaughtering for a non-Jew. We just focus on the fact that you're slaughtering for a Jew. So when it comes to the nedarim and the davais, the vows and the presents which one wants to bring on the Beis Hamikdash, which are not connected to Yom Tiv, if one wants to bring that on Yom Tiv in the Beis Hamikdash, let's just view the part that's owned by the Jew. You're slaughtering for a Jew. It's not only for you yourself. It's also for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You're not allowed to slaughter for others on Yom Tiv. You could say we're going to ignore the fact, just like we ignore the fact by an animal is owned by half by a non-Jew. We also ignore the fact that it's being brought for a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, so that's the question. So the answer is behema chatzah shel nachri chatzah shel Yisrael mutar l'shchita b'yom tov. He said the reason is as follows. The reason why an animal half owned by a Jew, half owned by a non-Jew is permitted to slaughter on Yom Tiv, the after lekazayis baso by shchita, because you don't have a choice. It's not like you can slaughter half the animal and say, okay, this animal, you can't decide which half you're slaughtering for. If you want the meat, you have no choice but to slaughter for the Jew. So you're permitted to go ahead and do it. But when it comes to the fulfilling your vows or bringing peace offerings, asur on Yom Tiv, asur shchatam Yom Tiv. Why? Because the way we understand it, and the way Rashi explains, is that when it comes to bringing sacrifices to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Yom Tiv, then the way we look at it, it's not like it's half yours and half HaKadosh Baruch Hu's. The way we look, it's all Hashem's. You're lucky that HaKadosh Baruch Hu lets you eat from his table. We view when we eat karbanos, we view as if you're taking a piece from HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. So when you're slaughtering the Beis Hamikdash on Yom Tiv, it's all for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's nothing for Yisrael. Now the halach is you have to slaughter for yourself and not slaughter for others. Therefore, that's how we could differentiate between the two. The reason why Beis Hillel held that one cannot go ahead and slaughter nidarim and davos, fulfilling your vows and presents on Yom Tiv, is because you're not slaughtering for yourself at all. You're slaughtering for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Hashem is nice to us and lets us eat some of it from his table. While it comes to the animal, half owned by a Jew, half owned by a non-Jew, that's a different story. The half owned by a Jew is half owned by a Jew. The only way to get to that animal, eat its meat, is by slaughtering it. We're on Chaf Eyam of the days. We're on 21A, and we're about 21A, about a third of the way down by the two dots. The last by Zachu, then two dots. Okay. Now, on this topic, Rav Chisda said, we have an animal which is half is owned by a non-Jew, half owned by a Yisrael, by a Jew. According to Rav Chisda, is permitted to shecht on Yom Tov, as we learned. Why? Because you cannot get a hold of any permissible meat from this animal without shechting it entirely. Now, what about that's an animal? Isa, what about dough? If you have dough, which is in partnership, half of this dough is owned by a Jew, half of this dough is owned by a non-Jew. You're not allowed to go ahead and bake it on Yom Tiv. Why? It's like, why are you baking the entire dough? Just split it. That you could split, cut it in half. This is for the non-Jew, this is for the Jew, and the Yisrael could go take it and do what he wants with his dough, and the Akum could take and do what he wants with his dough. Okay, now, Meisir Rav Chana Bar Chanoi, that Isas Klavim, now, we had a question, that we have a halacha that when it comes to Isas Klavim is a dough which the shepherds made to throw to their dogs, the sheepdogs. Now, it wasn't exactly the most edible dish, but the shepherds who are out in the field all day, they used to eat it as well. It was very coarse and a lot of bran. Now, as long as on condition that it's edible a human could consume it. Number one, you have to take off challah. And you could even use it to create an eir chatzeros. You could use it as the mavais. That's both the cases that when the entire all the courtyards joined together, or all the people in the courtyard joined together to create an eir, so they carry from one to the other, similar to the matzah in Kesar. So you could utilize that as its bread. And make a bracha on it. And if three people partake in the meal, they could make a mezima. Now this is the important part. Ne'efas b'yomtiv. You're permitted to go ahead and bake the dough that's usually served to the shepherd dogs. You're able to bake it on Yom Tov if it could be consumed by a human. And you could use its dough for matzah. Now, on this we ask, why? Why do we say why could one go ahead and take the entire dough, which is really set aside for the dogs, even though it could be consumed by a human? Why are we going to go ahead and why are you allowed to go ahead and totally cook it on Yom Tiv, why don't we split it? Whatever the shepherds want to eat for themselves, let them take for themselves, and it should be forbidden to cook the rest of the dough, to bake the rest of the dough, because you're not baking for yourself, you're baking for animals. That's the question. Now, again, because originally we said that according to Rav Chisda, if you have dough half owned by an akum, by an adulterer, and half owned by a Jew, you say to split it. Why is it that the dough owned, the dough which is set aside to use for dogs, why don't we split that? Why is that permitted to bake in entirety? So we answer, Shani Isas Klavim. It's a little different. The dough which is set aside for the shepherd dogs are different. Because perhaps, who said the dogs are going to eat the dough? Maybe if the shepherds have on hand a dead carcass, which makes sense, they're shepherds, there's plenty of sheep around, they could throw the dead sheep to the dogs, and they'll be able to eat the bread in entirety. So when I'm baking it on Yom Tiv, I don't know for sure for a fact that the dogs are going to eat all of it. Unlike the dough half owned by an akum, half owned by a Yisrael, at that point, when I bake it, I know I'm not baking for myself. Half of it is not owned by me. I have no permission. I'm stealing if I eat it. Why? When it comes to this special Isas Klavim, this dough set aside, which it was baked to feed to the dogs, to the shepherd dogs, in that case, you don't know what the outcome will come. So at the time of the baking on Yom Tiv, perhaps the shepherds will eat all of it themselves. Okay. Now when he is later Rav Chisda Hayil, and now we ask the question: does Rav Chisda really hold of this idea of Hayil? Since I'm A and B might happen, on Yom Tiv I could go ahead and do C. So does he hold of that? For Itmar, we have the following statement: what happens if one bakes or cooks from Yom Tiv to Chol? It's clear he finished his meal. That night's going to be weekday, and it's already 3, 4, 5 in the afternoon. And now he starts ahead and starts cooking and baking. Where it's clear the halacha, where it's clear it's not for Yom Tiv, it's clear that it's for weekday. What's halacha? Because Amar like it. Rav Chisda said they get lashes. Rabbi Boruch, because you cooked on Yom Tiv for no reason. Rabbi Boruch, Rabbi Amar any like it. Rabbi says you don't get lashes. Now Rav Chisda Amar like it lo yamin hayil. Now we see from here Rav Chisda, why does Rav Chisda say that if someone is baking and cooking late afternoon of Yom Tiv, and obviously it's for Chol, why don't we say, why is he getting lashes? We have Hayil. Now you don't know what's going to happen. How could you give him lashes? Perhaps at an hour before sunset, a whole load of guests are going to walk in, and he's going to have to serve them food. So why don't we use this Hayil? Since something might happen, we don't give him lashes. So so it's a question. First, we say by the shepherd, by the bread, we're saying that Rav Chisda is going to answer that since he might have a dead carcass of a sheep, then the shepherds might eat the entire bread, so therefore they could cook all of it now. But when it comes to, so we see he does hold of the idea of since something might happen on Yom Tiv, but when it comes to cooking late into Yom Tiv, we don't apply this hayah. We don't apply the halach of since, and he will get lashes. And we're not going to say, well, he shouldn't get lashes. Perhaps late into the day, guests are going to come. Now we'll just finish up the Bryce and finish up the Memra. Rabbi Amar any like it. Rabbi says they don't get lashes. Amrin Hoyel, we say Hoyel. That's our question. Our question on Rav Chisda is one place he says we apply the idea of since, that since something may happen is permissible on Yom Tiv. Another place he says we don't apply the halacha, we don't apply since something's going to happen, he doesn't get lashes. Now Ella loitema Hoyel. So really the truth is we're not using Hoyel. We're not using the idea that since they might have a carcass on them and they might be able to throw it to the dogs. We're not going to utilize that as the reason why it's permissible to cook and to bake the entire bread. Rather, the answer is no. In the case is that they for sure have, shepherds always have a dead carcass lying around, so they always have the ability to feed it to the dogs. So when the shepherds are baking this special bread on Yom Tiv, they know if they really want, they could always eat it themselves. Therefore, it's no longer since. It's a fact. They could eat all of it now. If they don't want to, that's their sin.
Even though they're planning to give it to the dog, since they do have the available.
That's what it seems like. Because the Vadi Efshar, it says the Vadi Efshar. I mean, what does Rashi say? What is the Rashi? But yeah, that's what I understand it is. Okay. We're by the 2 dots on 20, and so that's our answer. So again, Rav Chisda does not hold the idea of since, and that's why when it comes to on Yom Tov itself, if you're baking and cooking late in the afternoon, you will get lashes, and we're not going to use the excuse since perhaps some guests might come in a few minutes before Yom Tov is over. Therefore, it's permissible on Yom Tov. And when it comes to and therefore also when it comes to the dough, if it's half owned by a Jew, half owned by a non-Jew, it has to be split. When it comes to the dough for the shepherd dough, On that case, you're saying we're not using it since they for sure have the ability to go ahead and throw it to the throw nevela, a carcass to the dogs. Therefore, their baking of this bread on Yom Tov is a total for human consumption if they choose to do it. Now we're on by the 2 dots towards the bottom, about 10 lines up from the wide lines on Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph on 21:8. So b'nei Rav Huna b'nei Rav Huna. So we have the following from Rav Huna. Hani b'nei Ba'aga, these villagers, the Romo allow Kimcha de b'nei Chela, that the king instructed them that they have no choice but to prepare food, in this case baking, to bake bread for the army. Are they allowed to go ahead and bake it on Yom Tov? On Shabbos, of course, we understand. You're not allowed. It's one of the 39 malachos. But in Yom Tov, where technically you're allowed to go ahead and bake, but in this case, they're not baking for themselves. They're baking for adulterers. That is not permissible on Yom Tov. So how do they get around it? So Amarle Chazina, you should go look. If let's say they take one of these breads that they're baking for the army and they feed it to one of their children, and you see that the army is they're not so upset. They're not so stringent for you to take out one of the breads and give it to the children of the village. Then we could say, we'll say as they're baking the breads, we'll say this one's for the children, this one's for the children, and slowly they'll get them all out and they'll claim each one's for the children. And as they bake a new one, they'll say, okay, that one's for the one that was freshly baked is for the army. The one in the oven right now is for the children. We keep on doing that, and that will be enough for them to. That will be enough to matter it to make it permissible on Yom Tov. Because the one I'm baking right now, I'm choosing it to be for the children, even though I know I'm going to change my mind. V'shari vilav aser. But if the army is going to be, if the army is going to be makbid, they're going to be stringent and say not one of our bread, a loaf of bread, could be fed to anyone but us. Then it's going to not be permissible because every single loaf of bread you're baking is not for Yisrael, and it's going to be forbidden on Yom Tov. Now, but we asked the following question. We learned Ma'aseh b'Shimon HaTimani, that there was a story with a Shimon HaTimani. Shleiba emesh lebeis hamedrash. One evening, he did not come to the beis medrash. The Shachris Matra Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. In the morning, he found Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava took him to task and said, "Why did you not come to the beis medrash? Why did you not come to learn Torah last night?" So Amalei, because Belashas Bali Irenu, there was an army that came to our city, and he wanted to plunder the entire city. So how did we go ahead and get rid? How did we save ourselves from being plundered? So we slaughtered a few calf. We made a great feast for them. They were happy and they left. So it was Yom Tov, and they slaughtered a animal for the army on Yom Tov in order to pacify them. Now, Amar Lai Tamani. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba said, "Wow, did you really do that? I'm astounded." And by the way, we're on the first wide line on 21a. So perhaps the fact that you saved yourself from being plundered, at the same time you took a loss and you transgressed something. Torah says, it says you're only allowed to cook for yourself. You're not allowed to go ahead and cook for a non-Jewish army. How were they able to go ahead and slaughter a calf on behalf of the army? That's the question. Now we say, and now we're asking, what was Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava's kasha? What was his question?
Wasn't it pikuach nefesh?
So obviously, I was going to mention, obviously it wasn't pikuach nefesh. They were plundering. They weren't threatening lives. They're going to take away livelihood and leave the place in ruins. So if it would be that they were threatening their lives, which you would think during plundering, it's not exactly a safe situation, but for some reason that wasn't the answer. It wasn't saying that was a life-threatening situation.
Smash and grab.
So the answer was so he asked him, it's like, why did Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, what was his issue with slaughtering a calf on behalf of the army? You could slaughter it, and just like we said, when it came to the bread, that they could go ahead and claim just for ourselves and end up giving it to the army. The same thing should apply here. Let them eat the calf. They could perhaps eat the calf themselves as a hoyel. Since I could go ahead and perhaps eat it myself, therefore it should be permissible on Yom Tov. So I'm Rabbi Yosef, Egel Treifa. So Rabbi Yosef gave a good answer. He said that it was a treifa. It was not kosher. So because it had a puncture in its lung. So puncture in its lungs, which you're not allowed to eat it. So the fact that we're slaughtering it, could be for the consumption of the army. Therefore, he said perhaps you should have let them plunder and not slaughter an animal on behalf of the army. Because you transgressed the halacha of cooking for not for a Jew on Yom Tov. And that we say v'achazil klav. And that we say, but perhaps they could feed it to their animals, even though it's a treifa. When they were slaughtering, they could have said, there's a hoil. Since who said the army might just pick up and leave, and then we'll have an animal to throw to our klavim, to our dogs. Now Tanoi. So now we say that is that not necessarily is a good answer, because that is an argument. The Tanya, because we learned in a Brisa, that which you could feed to every soul. That is the only thing you're allowed to do for them. That's the pasuk concerning to the permission to cook on Yom Tov to eat on Yom Tov. Now, when the verse said for every soul, that would also perhaps come to include an animal. Because elsewhere it says if one kills or one hits, damages a soul of an animal, you have to pay up. So you see, soul could include that of an animal. So the Torah said lechem, no, it's for you. With that, we turn to the top of 21b, to Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, Amud Beis. Lechem lo yachlavim, for you and not for your dogs. Divrei Rabbi Yissi ben Rabbi Yissi Aglili. So according to Rabbi Yissi Aglili, you're not allowed to feed it to your animals. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba had a good question. How could you have slaughtered a treifa animal, which you were allowed to eat yourself? How could you have slaughtered it to feed to the army? That's usher. That's forbidden on Yom Tov, because you couldn't eat it. Your animals, and you're not allowed to feed it to your animals. Now let's continue with the Beitza Rabbi Kiva.
Why do you mind before he says club it? Why do you want to say for sure it's a problem? So you're allowed to give it to the animals.
No, but that wasn't the problem, because over there we had hoil. Over there, the whole heter. You're right. That Gemara wasn't going with this Tanya. He was going with the one that says that.
That was going to tell it that you can't.
You can't, right?
You can't.
Right. Rabbi Kiva holds. I feel nefesh be'ema b'mashma. Rabbi Kiva says no. The pasuk says nefesh. It says the soul. The mashma imkain. The Torah is telling you soul, even an animal. You allowed to go ahead and prepare food for your animal on Yom Tov. Imkain matam lechem. So what the Torah says for you? What's for you coming to tell us? Lechem lo yelav chachavim. For you and not for adulterers. Now, my word is the rabbi says klavim lo haitzias avodah chachavim. So what's the reason one should go ahead? Well, now we have a choice. Why is it that we are going ahead and we're including your animals and we're excluding non-Jews? Why one over the other? So the reason we include, according to Rabbi Kiva, that you're allowed to feed it to your animals, at the end of the day, you're required to feed them. They're requirements on you. And the requirement for you, and you don't have to support the non-Jews. It's not your business. So therefore, the reason why Rabbi Kiva chose one over the other is because of that reason, that it's incumbent upon you to support your animals. Okay, so that's the end of the story. And obviously, Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava was going with the one who held, the one who's not allowed to feed your animals on Yom Tov. Therefore, he said perhaps you should not have slaughtered that animal, and you should just let them plunder instead. Okay, we're by the two dots on Chaf Aleph on the base, 21b, towards the top, and we're going to continue on the topic of preparing food for your animals on Yom Tov. So Amar le Abai Rabbi Yosef. So Abai told Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Aglili the Amar lechem lo yechlavim, and that which we just mentioned in the Brisa. According to Rabbi Yosef Aglili, that says that for you and not it says for you and not for your dogs. Hani sufli lechay vasa. There's a type of a date which you feed to your chaya, to your animals. How is one permitted to go ahead and feed his animals on Yom Tov? So the question is going to be, because really it's muksa. These type of dates were animal feed. So if you're not allowed to feed your animals, then it's muksa. So how could one? Apparently, one is permitted to go ahead and throw the dates to one's animal. So how are you allowed to do that if it's muksa? And that we say, at the end of the day, it's permissible. You still could use it for burning a fire, and creating a burning of fire on Yom Tov is permitted because that's part of the cooking process. So the reason why you're allowed to pick it up and feed it to your animals is that it's not muksa, but it's usable in the fire. Now we ask Tenach by Vashasa. That's very good if it's dry and it's used and it can be consumed. If it's extremely moist, it's going to be muksa now, because you can't create a fire. You cannot go ahead and create a fire with it. Now we say no, a huge fire which will easily dry it up. It'll still be able to use as fuel. Therefore, it's permissible. Now, Tenach b'Yom Tov, that's permissible on Yom Tov. B'Shabbos ma'ikol meimar. How could one go ahead and do it on Shabbos when you can't feed it to a fire? It should be muksa. Now we say matalton agav rifta. What you do is you leave it on top of bread, and when you move the bread and then you're moving the date, it's permissible because the bread is not muksa. Shmuel says, there's no muksa if to something on top of bread, then there's no muksa, there's no problem because you're moving the bread. It happens to be there's something on top of it. That's not a problem. Now, Upligid Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Now, this Rav Huna that said that you're so this is going to be arguing on Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Rabbi Shua ben Levi. That you're allowed to invite guests who are adulterers or non-Jews on Shabbos. That's not a problem. But you can't invite them on Yom Tiv. Now, the reason one is not allowed to invite a Nachri, an Akum, an adulterer on Yom Tiv is because we're afraid you're going to cook more food for them. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to cook for anyone anyway. So there's no, we're not worried that you can cook food for him over anyone else. It's not permissible, right? You're not going to be cooking. On Yom Tiv, though, we're afraid you're going to go ahead and since it's permissible to cook on Yom Tiv, you're going to do, there's 10 people plus him. So now I have 11 people, I have to cook more food. So you're going to have it in mind, so you're going to be cooking more food for him. Now, Rav Acha bar Yaakov, I feel the Shabbos nami like Rav Acha bar Yaakov says you're not allowed to even invite an adulterer on Shabbos. Why? What's the problem? Mishum, because shirei kaises, that we're afraid of the of the leftover in the cup. That he's going to be drinking wine. His wine is going to be the wine that he picks up is going to be yayin nesach. It's forbidden. So the little bit of the yayin under on this cup, when you clear the table, you can't move his cup. We're afraid you're going to move his cup. And his cup is muksa because it's useless on Yom Tov. It's useless on Shabbos because it's yayin nesach. So ihachi didan nami. So then we say, what does it have to do with the non-Jew? Even ourselves, even our cups are muksa, right? Because if there's leftover wine, no one's going to drink someone else's wine. That's disgusting. So there was no difference in inviting him or inviting a neighbor that's Jewish, because either way you're going to have leftover with muksa. You're going to have wine and you're going to have leftovers on the bottom of the cup. Bottom of the cup is muksa. So what's the difference? So didan chod v'tarnigolim. So we say no, ours. The leftover of the Yisrael you could throw to the chickens. But the non-Jew also throw it to the chickens. So the answer is no. His is yayin nesach, and you can't derive any benefit from it, and you can't throw it to your chickens. Therefore, it's going to be muksa. Now we say agav kasa. Now why can't you carry it? Even though it's true, you're right that the wine inside the cup is going to be yayin nesach, and that's why. Rav Acha bar Yaakov said you can't invite him even on Shabbos because his wine's going to be muksa without the cup. Just like we said, you're allowed to carry the dates on top of bread, and it's not going to be a problem of muksa. Here I'm carrying the cup. Happens to be there's yayin nesach in the cup, but the cup's not muksa itself. So I'm carrying it agav the cup. I'm carrying it because I'm not carrying the yayin nesach. I'm carrying the cup. Happens to be there's yayin nesach inside of it. So mi'alemar Rava metalton kenusa agav ketema. Then one could go ahead and carry a whole pan because of the ashes. Even though there's pieces of wood on Yom Tov. Now, usually small pieces of wood and stone are muksa on Yom Tov, but Rava said one is permitted to carry the coal pan if there's ashes inside of it. Now the ashes are still usable. Now we say hasam lav isur hananinu. No, when it came to the coal, that wasn't isur hana. There was no isur hana in it. There was nothing forbidding. There was no anything. There was no item which was usur to have hana from. You cannot derive benefit from. Hachi isur hananinu. Over there, when it came to the cup of the wine of the adulterer, that is isra. Now you can't derive any benefit from it, even though it's true. The wine is in the cup, and perhaps I could carry the cup, and if I happen to carry wine in it, I happen to carry wine in it. But that's more stringent. It's on a higher level of muksa apparently because it's asr bahana. You can't derive any benefit from it. Therefore, we're not going to give the permission. We're not going to give you the heter of carrying muksa because of an item on top of a non-muksa item. So at the end of the day, it seems like we're saying that we have a machlekes. Could one invite a Yisrael, or could one invite a adulterer to one's meal on Yom Tiv? Everyone says you cannot, because that we're afraid you're going to cook more for him. But what about Shabbos? On Shabbos, we say it's a machlekes. Some say on Shabbos you could, some say Shabbos you can't. The one says that you could on Shabbos because we're not worried about cooking more for him. Can't cook for anyone on Shabbos anyway. And the one who said that you cannot is because of the leftover yayin nesach, which is forbidden. Try benefit from it left in the cup. And that's going to make not only, and you won't be able to clear the table, and I'm afraid you want to clear the table when you invite him, and you're going to be being over transgressing, carrying muksa, which is rabbinic on Shabbos. Okay, with that we're by the 2 dots on the first wide line on 21b. So, Amli Rav Acha Medifti Ravina. Now, Rav Acha Medifti told Ravina, "V'lahavi kagraf shaliri." We're continuing our topic. I'm not sure there's 2 dots here, but we're continuing our topic on carrying the yayin nesach from the table. We're not allowed to clear the table according to Rav Acha bar Yaakov, that you're not allowed to clear the table when there's leftover wine of an adulterer on Shabbos because of muksa, that we should say, why is it different than graf shleri? Graf shleri is a bedpan, and which is disgusting because it's disgusting. Allowed to remove it. People's leftover wine and leftover crumbs and leftover food is also disgusting. So why can't you clear the table because of the graf shleri? That even though it's muksa, it's permitted to clear the house from things that are disgusting. So we say, are you permitted to go ahead and set up the? You can't ask him to sit down and eat with him. You're not allowed to create graf shleri lechatchila. So you're not allowed to create something disgusting to begin with. So if you want to rely on graf shleri, that's only if it happens to happen. If garbage compiles in the house, then you could utilize the heter of graf shleri. But if you want to utilize the heter of graf shleri, so you shouldn't invite him to begin with, because you are creating a situation. We have to rely on it, and that we don't want it. We don't start that on Yom Tov on Shabbos. We don't start the situation which you'll find yourself which you have to go ahead and utilize the heter of graf to utilize the heter of graf shleri to move muksa on Shabbos. We rather you not start it. Now that we say adarabba, so adivrei rabba, so lemar Shmuel v'darsh. So Mar Shmuel was darshing to Rava and said mazimin esanachu b'Shabbos. He was saying over that one could go ahead and one could invite a non-Jew on Shabbos. And we can't invite a non-Jew on Yom Tov.
What's a dam?
So it seems something along the lines that he told him. It seems like Rava told Shmuel to darshan. He told him, "Go darshan. Go tell me a halacha." And the halacha that he pulled out and told him was this halacha that according to Mar Shmuel, he held that the halacha is one is allowed to invite an adulterer on Shabbos, but not allowed to invite an adulterer on Yom Tov. Now we're right before the Mishnah, the first Mishnah, by the two dots before the first Mishnah of Aleph Amid Beis. So when they happened upon this an adulterer on Yom Tov, they told him, he told him if they wanted to invite an adulterer on Yom Tov, this is what they said. They said, you could come, and just telling you have to be happy with the amount of food that we have. And if you don't, and you should know that if you're not happy, you have to be happy with how much we're working for, and if not, any extra work has nothing to do with you. So they used to invite him. They basically said you could come, but just be happy with what there is, and that's that. And if there's not enough food, too bad on you, and we're not going to make any more food. And that way, there's no chashash of you going ahead and actually cooking more food for on behalf of him. Okay, we are up to the Mishnah, the first Mishnah on 21b. Okay, now we're saying another halacha concerning cooking on Yom Tov. Now we're sort of going away from the cooking issue and we're going to heating water for personal use. So it says Beis Shammai, one's not allowed to go ahead and heat up hot water to soak his feet in. Only if it's only if you only use water which is good enough to drink. If you have water, if you're going to heat up water, which if you want to drink, you could drink, then you could go ahead and use it to wash in. The Beisil says no. Beisil says any water which you heat up, even though it's not consumable by humans, still it could be used to wash your feet with. And also one allowed to create a fire and to use it for warmth. Now, according to Beis Shammai, it's because the whole hector was only to do with food, not to use for personal use. So if the water can't be, according to Beis Shammai, if the water can't be consumed by human consumption, then you have no right to go ahead and cook and bake it, cook it and to boil it on Yom Tov. And this says no, even that's permitted, and we should see now. And also you could go ahead and make a fire to keep to go ahead a large fire to warm yourself from. Says the Gemara. Now this halacha of the creating the fire, is this going to Beis Hillel? Is this going to everyone? Does everyone agree with this or not? So Divrei Kolhi, no, even Beis Shammai agrees. V'shani li Beis Shammai beinanos kol gufay lanos eiver echad. And according to Beis Shammai, and we're teaching even according to Beis Shammai that whether you're having just a little bit of either if your entire body is driving benefit from it, and now our question is, meaning the question is as follows: that do we say that according to Beis Shammai that everyone agrees with it, but according to Beis Shammai, there's a difference between the entire body being warmed up. If the entire body is being warmed up, then you could go ahead and do it on Yom Tov. Meaning you could create a big bonfire. But if you to try benefit for one aver, for one limb, like the foot, then you can't do it on Yom Tov unless it's for the Yoma could consume it. So the question is like this: that is this halacha that one is permitted to create a bonfire in order to get warm from? Is that going like Beis Shammai? Is Beis Shammai doing that to a point? Because if Beis Shammai is agreeing to that, it's a little funny. Because then we have a question, which the Gemara is going to answer. But the question, technically, we have a problem. Because Beis Shammai says that I'll go ahead and boil water which someone can't drink to wash your feet in. But then at the end he says one could create a bonfire to keep warm from. Now a bonfire to keep warm from, you can't cook on a bonfire. So we're assuming it's not for cooking. It's only to keep warm from. So it's a bit of a contradiction. One place it says you could do something for human comfort and not food on Shabbos, on Yom Tov, and it says you cannot. So the answer to that would be, no, there's a difference. If it's for the entire body, and the entire body is going to get the warmth, then we allow you to create a bonfire, even though you can't use it for cooking. But when it comes to one foot, to one limb, then you only could do it in a manner that one could use for cooking, or the other way to understand. This is no. That halacha is only Beis Hillel. Only Beis Hillel agrees to the idea that one could create a bonfire to get warm from. And but Beis Shammai says no. Anytime you do anything for personal use, it's only on condition it could be used for cooking or baking on Yom Tov. Tashma. And what's the answer? We have another brisa that says openly that Beis Shammai holds you're not allowed to create a large bonfire to get warm from on Yom Tov. So that answers our question that last line in the Mishnah we just read that said the one is allowed to go ahead and create a bonfire in order to get warm to become warm from. That's according to Beis Hillel and not according to Beis Shammai. Okay, we have to end there. Okay, now we can talk about tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be 50 minutes before Mincha. What time is Mincha? I'll put it out on the chat, I guess.